Hello, this is Larry again, and talking about my Greek Orthodoxy. And from time to time, I try to make a video about this, about my faith. And one of the things I wanted to share today is, I've been using the Nicene Creed as kind of like my template for discussing various issues regarding Greek Orthodoxy, Christianity, etc. And I think that's very important as an Orthodox Christian, and I think even for most mainstream Christians, really the Nicene Creed, which was promulgated in 325 AD in the First Ecumenical Council, when all the bishops came together throughout the Roman Empire to talk about a burning issue about the nature of Jesus Christ. And so they basically promulgate this document, which is basically the foundation basis of what had been passed down among Christians throughout the Roman Empire during that first 3 centuries of Christianity. I said, this is what we believe. This is what the apostles handed down to us from Jesus, and we're not making this up on our own. We're not just coming up with our own idea. This is what was passed down to us, and we're just confirming that this is the belief. And this Nicene Creed is something that the mainstream of Christianity adheres to, whether you're talking about the nature of Christ, the Trinity, the virgin birth, the judgment to come. All of these things are a part of mainstream Christianity, and especially Greek Orthodoxy, my faith. And this is important because one of the phrases in the Nicene Creed, it says that Jesus Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered and was buried, and then he rose again on the 3rd day, according to the Scriptures. So there are 2 very important phrases in there from my perspective as I talk about these things, and I want to focus on one, but the 2 is, of course, according to the Scriptures, and then suffering under Pontius Pilate. Why is suffering under Pontius Pilate so important? Because that gets to what I guess I would call the side of humanity, human history. God came into human history. He appeared. He took flesh. He became like us, human beings, and lived a historical life. He lived a real life that was within a timeline of what we would call history. History being that, historians, of course, myself being a historian, my degree in history is in history, ancient history particularly, and we say history is kind of like that time period where man began to write about himself, and that's kind of like one of the ways to look at it. And history, of course, can go much further back than that. But history is very important because it shows us that this is a real timeline, that this is something that really happened that is equivalent to our lives. And that's important to me historically, and it paves the way for how I approach to a lot of Christianity. And I think a lot of times for many Christians, history stops at some very odd time periods. Whether it's stopping at any particular point during the Reformation, or any particular point during the medieval period, or whatever, the Renaissance, or up to modern times, the early 19th century. Christianity doesn't stop there. Christianity goes back in history, and you can continue on if you want to follow an entire timeline back to Abraham himself, perhaps. But that's what the Pontius Pilate thing means to me. It says this was a real person in real history, and you can trace that back. And Pontius Pilate is, he's from the secular government. He's doing what secular governments do. And that's very real. That's very realistic. So that's important to me. And so when I go forward, I also look for those historical markers. The Nicene Creed being a historical marker. You look at the writings of the early church leaders and teachers, and these people were markers. They're historical markers as to what was Christianity. What did they believe? What was the mainstream ideas that were promulgated? And that's what the Nicene Creed represents to me. And that's why history, as a part of Christianity, real history in its entirety, that is a part of Christianity, that's what I call my Greek Orthodoxy. It's not truncated. It takes into account everything. So whenever I'm thinking about, for me, when I'm thinking about communion, I'm thinking about historically what is the entire timeline. I don't cut it off at a certain point. It's like from Christ until now. What is the entire timeline of what was originally given and what continues on as a historical marker? So that's what I look for in my faith, is that it's historical and that it that it contains those mainstream historical markers. And my view is when you get off the road of the mainstream historical markers of Christianity, that's when you run into trouble. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today, the whole idea of the historical markers. And if you're looking for a sense of, Greek Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and from my perspective, has maintained and stayed on course with those historical markers, whether we're talking about the Nicene Creed, whether we're talking about communion, whether we're talking about the Theotokos, whether we're talking about our understanding of the judgment to come, the second coming of Christ. All of these things have been maintained in terms of the historical markers. So that's about it for now, and until next time, bye.